One of the things that we do quite often with lists is visit each item in the list systematically through the sequence. We call this iterating through a list, and it's very similar, in fact it's identical, to the idea of iterating through a string. Any sequence in Python can be iterated over, which means we can visit each item systematically. Let's say that we had, for example, a list of words. So let's create a list of strings, the string cat, the string dog, the string house, and perhaps the string cow. Now that list has an inherent sequence. We know that the items are positioned. We know that we can access items by index. We can access items using slicing. So one of the things to think about is that because it is in fact a sequence, we can utilize our sequence iterator, which remember is the for statement. So the first way we can iterate through a list is by simply using what is called direct iteration or by item iteration. We simply create a for statement that says for every item, and our loop variable will simply be each item in the list one at a time, in, and then we can use our list as the sequence. Now inside of the for statement we have to decide what to do with each item. So remember what's going to happen here is that for every item in this list of words, item will first be cat, then it will be dog, then it will be house, then it will be cow. So my list will be iterated over, and item is just a variable name which will take on values of the items in the list one at a time from left to right. So for this example, why don't we do something simple? Let's print the length of the item. So that's going to print out the length of the string, the length of the word. And then let's also print the uppercase version of each word. So the idea here is that as we move through the items of the list, each string will be given to the print statement, and the print function then, its parameters, the first parameter will be the length of that word, and the second will be the word converted to uppercase, and this will happen then for all items or all words in my list of words, and if I hit return we can see that we get the result we would expect. Item is cat, the length of cat is 3, cat is in uppercase, then the item becomes dog, then the item becomes house, then the item becomes cow. And so when we do this direct iteration, whether we're iterating through a list of strings or a list of integers or a list of any kind of object, we can process each object independently. It's important to realize that whatever we're going to do these items, we have to be able to do it to all of the items. Since we're going to visit each item one at a time, and since in lists it's possible to have different kinds of data types collected together into one list, we need to make sure that whatever we're going to do can be done with each of those items independently. Now the other way that we can iterate is to use the index value. So remember that my list indexed by 0 is the first word, my list indexed by 1 is the second word, and so on. So if we were to access the item of my list using the index value, all we would need to do is to create some kind of a structure where the index value would change as we go through the iteration. First we'd want the index to be 0, then we want it to be 1, then 2, and so on. If we look at this pictorially, we can see that if we have our list of strings, cat, dog, house, and finally cow, we know that this is the 0th item, we know that this is the 1 item, we know that this is the 2 item, we know that this is the 3 item, and if we want to iterate through this list item by item, we can use the index value to access each of these strings one at a time. All we need to do is come up with some sort of an iteration pattern that will be 0, 1, 2, 3. Remember, the length of this list is 4, and if we think about that a little bit, all that means is that we have to iterate using a range that starts at 0 and ends with the length minus 1. So for any list, we want to start at the 0th position and go up to, but not including the length of the list, because the last index will be 1 less than the length. Well, we know how to do that. We can simply use our range function. So for some index, and we'll use the variable index in this case, in the range, starting at 0, which is the default, up to, but not including the length of the list. And remember that my list is a reference to a list with 4 items. The length of my list is 4. So using the range, this would be 0 through 3. And now all we have to think about here is that index is not the item, but rather the position of the item. So we can do the same thing we did before. We can print the length, but now instead of putting in the item, we have to put in the access or the index structure for the item. My list indexed by the variable called index. And then let's also print out the uppercase conversion. So my list indexed by the variable index dot upper. And what we'll discover here is that this print statement now does exactly the same thing it did before. The only exception is how we went about doing the iteration. Once again, the variable index starts at 0 and goes up through 3, since the length is 4, printing the length of the item at that index and the value at that index converted to uppercase. So we can iterate by item directly, or in this case we're iterating indirectly using the index or the position of each item.